From Joshua chapter 24, verses 1 through 3. The tribes renew the covenant. Then Joshua gathered all of the tribes of Israel to Shechem, I think, and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel, as they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, "Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your ancestors, Terah and his sons Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates and served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan, and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac." Now there's chapter 24, verses 14 through 25. "Now, therefore, revere the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods of that your ancestors served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now, if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Then the people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight. He protected us along the way, He protected us all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all of the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore we will serve the Lord, for he is our God." But Joshua said to the people, "You cannot serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you for good." And the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." Then Joshua said to the people, "You are witnesses against yourself that you have chosen the Lord to serve him." And they said, "We are witnesses." He said, "Then put away the foreign gods that are among you, and incline your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel." The people said to Joshua, "The Lord our God we will serve, and we will obey. Him we will obey." So Joshua made the covenant with the people that day and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem, I think. The last one today is Amos chapter 5, verses 21 to 24. I despised your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melodies of your harps. But let justice roll down like water, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. May God bless these words to our understanding.
in the books of Torah, Joshua was the hand-picked successor to Moses. And so after Moses dies on the very edge of Jordan, Joshua is the one who is responsible for leading the people across the river. And the first half of the book of Joshua is the stories of conquest. Most memorably, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. The first half of the book tells how Joshua leads the people, and they conquer and they conquest, and in theory are supposed to drive everybody out. It's safe to say they don't. We'll get back to that in a moment. But in theory, they're supposed to drive everybody else out so that the land can be for the people of Israel, as was promised to Abraham so many years before. The second half of the book of Joshua is dividing the land up. Now that we've conquered it, we're going to divide it up amongst ourselves, because that's what conquerors do. And now we get to the end of the book, and Joshua is near death. So he calls all the people together, and he reminds them what God has done, because over and over again in Hebrew Scriptures, we're reminded what God has done because people tend to have short memories, and they tend to forget. I'm sure that's not true of us now, but, Joshua calls the people together, and he says to them, all right, choose. And this is when we know that they didn't drive everybody out. Because he says, choose. Are you going to serve the God who led you here? Or are you going to serve the gods like all of your neighbors? So obviously they're still there. And the people wholeheartedly say, but of course. What are you at? This is a silly question. Who else would we serve but the God who led us here? And Joshua does not respond by, oh, good, you made the right choice. Joshua says, no, you can't do that. You're not able. You won't do it. It's an interesting response. I think Joshua does that because Joshua fully understands how hard it is going to be. Joshua is asking the people, are you going to be different from all of your neighbors? And they say, sure we are. And Joshua says, I'm not so sure you can. Now, the rest of the story of Hebrew Scripture shows that the people have trouble living up to that pledge. They wander back and forth. So we have the stories of the prophets who come to say, okay, let me remind you of something. You've gone astray. You've lost the path. This is how it's supposed to be. Because it's hard. I don't think Joshua is offering the people one choice. I don't think it's choose A or B, and until further notice, that's where we are. I think Joshua is putting before the people a question which they have to answer over and over and over again, which seems pretty real to life to me. I think many of our important choices are choices we don't make once. They're choices we make over and over and over again. As life comes before us and we used to say, okay, how do I live out that choice now? How do I live out my choice to follow God today, in this world? Because we are still offered that same choice. Are you willing to be different, to have different values, to have different priorities than the world around you? It's the same question 3,000, 3,500 years later. Are you willing to be the person who will say, I'm going to be different. I'm going to say this is more important. This is of higher value. And it still isn't easy. It still is, I can still understand why Joshua turns to the people and says, yeah, I don't think you're going to do that. I mean, in the end, we all end up serving somebody or something. None of us are fully independent agents, as much as we might like to believe we are. As much as we might like to try to convince ourselves, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm perfectly responsible, and nothing ever shapes my choices. Well, I didn't even believe that when I was a teenager. Bob Dylan wrote, "You may be an ambassador to England or France. You may like to gamble. You might like to dance. You may be the heavyweight champion of the world. You may be a socialite with a long string of pearls. But you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. You might be a rock and roll addict prancing on the stage. You might have drugs at your command, women in a cage. You might be a businessman or some high-degree thief. They may call you doctor. They may call you chief. You may be a construction worker working on a home. You may be living in a mansion, or you might live in a dome. You might own guns. You might even own tanks. You might be someone's landlord. You might even own banks. You may be a preacher with your spiritual pride. You may be a city councilman taking bribes on the side. Dylan was such a cheery person, wasn't he? You may be working in a barber shop. You may know how to cut hair. You may be somebody's mistress. Maybe somebody's heir. Might like to wear cotton, might like to wear silk. Might like to drink whiskey, might like to drink milk. You might like to eat caviar, you might like to eat bread. You may be sleeping on the floor, sleeping in a king-size bed. But you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord. But you're going to have to serve somebody. Dylan puts the same question before us that Joshua does. Who will you serve? And the follow-up to that question is, and how are you going to show that that's who you serve? How will you serve? How will you live out that choice? It's one thing to make grand statements of, well, of course I'm going to serve God. Of course I'm going to live in the life of love. Of course I'm going to... Okay, when the rubber meets the road, what does that look like? That's the question Amos asks. Amos is an interesting prophet because many people profess to love Amos. And I do. I quite enjoy reading the book of Amos. But it's also very arguable that for those of us in the West, those of us in middle class, those of us who live with a lot of privilege, if we like Amos, we may not fully understand him. Because Amos challenges our privilege. Amos challenges our values. Amos challenges how we live out that choice. And I always love reading these words in the middle of a church service. I despise your festivals, and take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like water, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. It's one thing to say, yes, I will serve God. It's another to say, and this is how I'll do it. But let justice flow down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Serve each other. In a couple of weeks, we'll hear from Matthew's Gospel, the parable where Jesus says to one group, come to me and be blessed, because I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was sick and in prison and you visited me. And they'll say, what are you talking about? Slight paraphrase. What are you talking about? We didn't do any of those things. And Jesus will answer, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. They all tie together. From Joshua gathering the people together and saying, who are you going to choose? Who are you going to serve? Ah, you can't really do that. Who are you going to serve? No, you can't really do that. Who are you going to serve? To Amos reminding the people that it's not about the temple. It's not about the offerings. It's not about the grand songs and the worship and the solemn assemblies. It's about what it looks like on the ground. To Jesus reminding us to love each other. To Paul speaking especially to the church in Corinth and saying, you're getting it wrong again. Your community is too divided. To many, countless others over the years who have come to the church and said, no, it's not about the grand temples. It's not about the grandeur. It's about how we live love with each other. Choose this day whom you will serve. Choose this day how you will serve. Because as Dylan reminded us, you gotta serve somebody. In the end, you gotta serve somebody. Who will it be? What will it look like? And how will it bring peace and hope and love to a troubled world? May God lead us, kicking and screaming if need be, dragging us along by the tail, but may God lead us to serve and to love. Amen. We have a hymn.